We can talk about racism, we can talk about sexism, we can talk about xenophobia, we can talk about anti-trans, anti-queer, and we can talk about all of these things. At the root of all of those things is harm.
Harm.
It is both the way we are culturalized and socialized in this country and other places in the world, but it is also humans who don't know how to deal with difference acting on it in a way that is harmful.
Mhm.
So, one of the lessons that I carry with me and that I try to offer to other people is that every person you know is different from you. And I know that when we are in groups, we're always trying to find the thing that makes us alike. And I'm not saying we should stop doing that. What I am saying is that we should stop ignoring or villainizing the things that make us different. I think we need some balance in the way we approach community. And part of what we look for people who love the same things we love, who want to be in the same places we're in, who come from generally the same backgrounds and ideologies. I think where we should be looking for sameness is in values. We should listen to and observe other people's lived experience and not discount it because we don't have a concept of what it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when I say stuff like we should, what I really mean is people who have not lived a marginalized experience need to learn or unlearn their ideas of difference and to appreciate people's lived experience for what it is. My father has an expression, you can't grow a pine tree from a cactus seed, which basically just means whatever's in you is what's coming out.
Mhm.
And in America, we have been trying to grow pine trees with cactus seeds for a long time. We've been saying we are the greatest country in the world. Our citizens are happy here. We are one nation under God, indivisible. But that truth only applies to some citizens. And so until that language is true for all, it's not true. So the quote, the James Baldwin quote is, I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. And I think that quote is sort of an anchor for how I view being a citizen of this country. Sometimes when we're talking about honesty, we'll say we shouldn't share our feelings when we're talking about what is real. And I disagree with that. I think that feelings are very much fact for the person that is having those feelings. And so in our curiosity about where we need to be honest, we do need to consider the feeling that is associated with what has happened. Right?
That's
The person or people who have caused the harm don't get to tell the person who has been harmed when to get over it or how to
Mhm.
get over or how to respond to it. We're not going to get into the oppression Olympics and who's
Yeah.
had it worse, right? But if we fail to have a conversation about the harm that has occurred to the people who are descendants of enslaved humans in America, and if we fail to have a conversation about the harm that has occurred to the descendants of people who were here before this land was colonized, called them Native American, called them indigenous, the people who were here before, if we're not going to be honest about how we got here, right? And why so many people are still left behind. This trauma that we experience is a shared trauma, right? That you cannot inflict the amount of harm on people or be descendants of people who have inflicted the amount of harm on people without that trauma having a through line in your body as well. And so there's healing that needs to happen on both sides of this equation until we decide to heal from it, then it just continues to fester and to smell.
Yeah.
And Isabel Wilkerson, who is the author of the book Caste and The Warmth of Other Suns. And in the book Caste, which was one of my favorite books ever still, I read in 2020, parts of that book are still resonating with me. And the movie Origin, which is based on the book as well. But she makes reference, Isabel Wilkerson makes reference to America as an old house. And I live in an old house. So that analogy really spoke to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you inherit an old house, when you move into an old house, um, it comes with problems sometimes. And you weren't the person who built it. You didn't live there first, right? You did not create these problems, but you live here. And you can let the roof leak on your head, or you can fall through the hole in the floor, or you can fix it. So I really appreciate that idea of how our country is this old house that we've all inherited and that we got to coexist in. And either we can repair the things that are damaged, or we're going to live with it how it is. And it's just going to get worse if we don't fix it, right? If you've ever had a leaky roof, that you did not repair or did not repair timely, the hole just gets bigger. The other person whose work I reference is Marie Kondo. Marie Kondo goes into people's homes, into their spaces, and helps them organize the stuff. She walks in and asks people, what of these things is bringing you joy? And she asks you to either hold on to the things that bring you joy or to bless them and send them on their way. But the beginning of that process is taking everything out. It's a thing I invite people to do when I work with them, is to look at all your stuff. There is more to the story no matter who told it to you. And you should stay curious about what else is missing from the story.
This is Social Justice Origin Stories. I'm your host, Rolando Thompkins-Jones. Social Justice Origin Stories is a storytelling project that highlights personal stories and defining moments that have inspired individuals and organizations to labor for equity and social justice. Through truth-telling, the honest sharing of their experiences, storytellers teach us about themselves, enabling us to learn about ourselves and our world through their stories. By reconnecting with pivotal moments of activation in their lives, they invite us to do the same. At Social Justice Origin Stories, we believe that there's power in storytelling and lived experience is experience. There's room enough for all of us to do this work. There are many ways to contribute, and our contributions don't need to be the same. We can enter and remain engaged in the work using the gifts that are special to us while supporting others and using theirs. We have the capacity to grow and change for the better when exposed to new information and experiences. We believe in our inherent worth and capabilities, and we possess the power to inspire and create change within ourselves and others. We can transcend the confines of the status quo to imagine and design more equitable and humanizing systems. Thank you all for joining us today, whether you are listening or whether you're watching this on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I'm really happy to be joined by our guest, Tracie Jae. So Tracie and I were introduced to one another virtually through a mutual connection. I had been starting my work with Social Justice Origin Stories and sharing some of the storytelling, was contacted by a friend of yours who had also connected to me and just given me some affirmations on the project and all this is great. And I also know there's someone I know out there who will be really great, who will be really incredible to share their story if you're interested in, or even just connecting. And so I appreciated being able to be connected to Tracie. We had a chance to talk. We met and talked a little bit. And honestly, Tracie, as I'm looking at you again here today and thinking back on that conversation, I wish we would have also recorded that conversation because it was so great. But I'm so happy that you're back here with me today. And so, yes, I'm very honored to be here and talking with Tracie. We'll learn more about Tracie's origin stories, and we'll also talk about the Quiet Rebel. We'll learn a lot about the work that you're doing. And oh, you know what? I'll let you tell it. But that's just another thing I'll just say, affirming and representing and acknowledging all the introverts out there. We are out here and really honored to be speaking with a fellow introvert, among many other things. Really appreciating you being here. So thank you for being here, Tracie.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here, and shout out to our mutual friend for this introduction. It's already been a gift. My name is Tracie Jae. In business and in life, I am the quiet rebel. My work in the world is creating incremental and organic shifts to the status quo using mostly conversations as instruments for change. These days, when people ask me what I do, I say that I am a human culture strategist and educator. It feels like a mouthful, but the things I used to say before that didn't really feel accurate. So I'm trying to get more clear about what it is I do in the world and how I do it.
What it is you do in the world and how you do it. And as you get more clear and communicating that out into the world, for folks who are listening and you're taking part in that practice yourself, as you get more clear about the messages we're communicating, it also provides clarity to the folks we're communicating to. It brings us the folks that we can be in solidarity with. I was talking about this with another guest too, also, is as you were saying, Tracie, being clear, communicating your message, what you do into the world, and your message will land because, in a way, even our meeting came as a result of communicating to the folks and the message resonated with who it needed to resonate with. And there, here we are today. So thank you so
Exactly.
much for being here. As you reflect on your own origin stories, you mentioned wanting to talk about how your family both shielded you and prepared you for racial injustice. And also mentioning the breadcrumbs, those experiences that helped you to know that what we're experiencing societally, in many ways, shouldn't be normal.
Yes, I grew up in a really solid nuclear family. My parents are still married. They have been married for 55 years at this point, are still living in the same house where I grew up. And it was my parents and my sister and me. And that was it. That was our family. That is our family. And I grew up in a mostly homogenous community. Most people would describe it as middle class or middle income community, mostly Black and brown people. And our neighborhood was a result of white flight. So my parents moved there in the early 70s, and people who were not Black and brown moved out. That neighborhood still looks very much like the neighborhood I grew up in. And in my early childhood, I went to schools with mostly Black people. And so this is where I say my family shielded me. I went to primary school with mostly Black children, had mostly Black teachers through fourth grade. That experience really shaped how I see Blackness, how I see Black people, and how I see community. In fifth grade, my world shifted a little bit. My father decided that my sister and I needed to go to the schools with smart children, air quotes, smart children, because I was already in schools with smart children. But there were designated schools, for the gifted and talented. And so we took these tests and we were enrolled in schools for the gifted and talented. They were called Vanguard schools in Houston, where I live. And the fifth grade was the first time I was ever in a classroom with students from all kinds of backgrounds. I was able to completely be Tracie. There are breadcrumbs, right, that I mentioned. History teacher was away this particular day, and the
Mm,
student prepared a lesson on the pros and cons of slavery.
mhm. The pros
Yeah,
and cons now.
the
Pros?
the pros and cons of
Okay.
slavery. This is the first one of the earliest moments that I can recall where I felt the need to stand up for myself and stand up for the people around me and to offer people something else to hear. It was probably the birth of the quiet rebel.
Okay.
And I don't remember the dialogue, of course, because this has been 40 years now, saying there are no pros. You can't convince me that there are pros. I remember her trying to offer us what she thought were the pros, and our class, not just me, but our class, rebutting everything she offered. And I remember her crying. I don't remember it in this way from past tense, but today I would say it was a very clear example of white women tears.
Okay.
And let me be clear when I say that it is okay for white women to cry. It is not okay for white women or any people to use those tears to try to get out of accountability for the harm that they've caused to somebody else.
Accountability.
Right? You should not use your tears to skip accountability or to make it look like someone has harmed you when in fact you are the harmer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, I've had an occasion or two to speak with the regular teacher from that time who was our history teacher, and he remembers that incident as well. And he remembers us saying to him, "Please don't ever leave us alone with this woman again. She is harmful."
Never again. Yeah. And so you say that was one of those first experiences where you felt I have to speak up, not just for myself, but also the people around me.
Right. We cannot let this stand.
Do you remember what ended up happening after that? Did the teacher never come back? Did your regular teacher came back? Did y'all kind of have a reset? Because it also sounded like in the story, the other kids in the class at that time were also united with you in that no, like, what are we debating about this for? What do you mean pros to slavery? What are you talking about?
I don't actually have real memories about what happened next, but
Okay.
I do remember that my classmates and I were unified in this moment.
All right. So you talk about the breadcrumbs that led you to really recognize and understand this shouldn't be normal. Yeah. Oh,
No, it's
yeah.
not normal. Middle school was a really formative time for me. Now that I'm like looking back at it as an adult, we had a different incident that happened in my personal life in that same space of time. My family went on a road trip. We took a lot of road trips when I was growing up. And my parents had decided they wanted to go to New Jersey to visit Atlantic City. They gamble. We gamble as a family. We're gamblers. They had been to Las Vegas several times, but had never been to Atlantic City. So they wanted to go to Atlantic City. And as a sort of trade off for taking us on this really long road trip, they also took my sister and me to Disney World.
Mhm.
So this was, by all accounts, a great family experience. The cherry on the top of that experience was that we went in my daddy's brand new Cadillac. So his dream car, a red Cadillac.
Okay.
So we are traveling east in this red Cadillac, the four of us. Um, and at some point on our journey, and I don't recall now if it was coming or going, we were pulled over by a white police officer. Uh, and I remember it being at night. I remember feeling a different kind of fear than I've ever felt. I still feel it in my body, that palpable fear.
That same
Or
fear.
that not knowing why I felt this fear, right? Because I had never been really exposed to what I knew to be racism then, but it just didn't feel good. It felt frightening. And in a recent conversation with my family about that incident, um, I was reminded that the police officer asked if that was his car. And my sister being um, taken aback by the fact that this man was asking a man with a wife and 2 children with a car full of stuff if that was his car. And that is another sort of pivotal moment in my formation as a human and as an activist and as a speaker and a writer and a thinker.
Yeah.
Because why? Because there was no reason.
There was no reason. It's this assumption. Oh, wow, look at this. This is a nice Cadillac. And here we go. We got this black man here driving. That's too much car for you. Like, how did you get this? Is this your car? Are you sure this is your car? Like, it had more to do with that officer's socialization and the way he had been uh, indoctrinated into white supremacy and racism, but it still impacted your lives, though, in that moment. It still impacted. Yeah.
Yeah. It impacted me for a long time.
Yeah.
I still am uneasy with police officers. Like,
Hmm.
it's a core memory in my cells at this point.
Yeah.
There were others. There are things that I recognize in hindsight that were actively racist that I didn't realize in that moment. In high school, I was on the speech and debate team, and uh, I used to do something called, I want to say it was called extemporaneous prose.
Mm.
We had to read a passage, right? That's all we're doing is reading,
Yeah.
right? But I chose a passage from Their Eyes Were Watching God. And if you are familiar with the text in that book, it is antebellum English. It is, African American English vernacular. It is language of people who were not trained to read and write and taught themselves, right?
That's right. That's right.
Uh, and it is difficult for a person who was trained in Queen's English, if you will, um, to speak and to read. And so when the scorers of that event handed back my score, they said I chose something that was too easy. And as if that was not enough, the people who practiced with me, my teachers, who knew how hard I practiced and trained and how difficult this was for me, did not speak up for me.
Did not speak up. Mm.
So I knew in the moment that I recognized it as racism. Right? This is an adult lens looking back at that, calling it that. Because we have to call a thing a thing. They looked at me and they looked at the words on the page and they decided that surely she must speak that way already. And that surely
Mm.
she chose something that was simple for her.
As you talk about the breadcrumbs, you're taking us along on your journey in the story. A similar assumption that was made around, like, how could you possibly afford this car? How is this your car? And also another assumption of surely she must talk like this already, right? Rooted in their white imagination. So I'm seeing the through line and you recognizing it as racism now, but at that time didn't necessarily have that language for it.
I didn't have that language for it. What I recognized as then was harm,
Yeah.
period. Right.
Yeah.
And we can talk about racism, we can talk about sexism, we can talk about xenophobia, we can talk about anti-trans, anti-queer, and we can talk about all of these things. At the root of all of those things is harm.
Harm.
It is both the way we are culturalized and socialized in this country and other places in the world, but it is also humans who don't know how to deal with difference acting on it in a way that is harmful.
Hmm.
So one of the lessons that I carry with me and that I try to offer to other people is that every person you know is different from you. And I know that when we are in groups, we're always trying to find the thing that makes us alike. And I'm not saying we should stop doing that. What I am saying is that we should stop ignoring or villainizing the things that make us different. Because there is no person in your life, not even the people who you love the most, the people you like the most, who are the same as you. All of us are different. Full stop.
Yeah. All of us are different. And you said, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like humans who are not used to either being around difference, the concept of difference, and are responding to that difference in harmful ways. So, hey, if we could increase our capacity to understand, to not be afraid of difference, maybe we respond to that in ways that aren't harmful, in ways that are more understanding, you know?
Yeah. But I think we need some balance in the way we approach community. And part of what we look for people who love the same things we love, who want to be in the same places we're in, who come from generally the same backgrounds and ideologies. I think where we should be looking for sameness is in values. We should be looking for sameness in understanding of the world, right? We should listen to and observe other people's lived experience and not discount it because we don't have a concept of what it is. And I say that, and I'm going to generalize now, but
Mhm.
often Black people and people from other marginalized groups already get that. We already understand that because so often in our lives, in our worlds, we don't have a choice but to understand other people's lived experience and to know in advance how it might impact us.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when say stuff like we should, what I really mean is people who have not lived a marginalized experience
Yeah.
need to learn or unlearn their ideas of difference and to appreciate people's lived experience for what it is.
Yeah. Appreciate people's lived experience for what it is. I hear you when you say you're making the generalization, but I hear what you're saying. It's like not only do we know or not have a choice in often recognizing and understanding what difference is, for many of us, I feel like there's also this understanding of what it means when difference, our lived experience are not accepted and recognized and paid attention to. And knowing what that feels like, being on the outside of these systems that are said to be for everybody. So having that capacity to acknowledge and understand difference as it is, and then also knowing what it feels like, the absence of the acceptance of that. So I appreciate you sharing that. You've also mentioned, and every time you say it, I just underlined it in my mind, human, 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 human. And in your work, you talk about using a more human approach. So could you tell us a little bit about the Quiet Rebel and the work that you do and how those experiences will connect to what you do today? And then also tell us a little bit more about what that means to you, using a more human approach.
Thank you for that question. So let me say that I sort of came to this work by accident.
Mm,
Um, and I believe I'm doing the work I was born to do, both. I am a curious person, have always been a curious person. So curious that my mother bought me a book when I was like 5 or 6 years old called Tell Me Why. Because I just want to know why about everything. And in 2019, after many years of interfaith work, I leaned into a curiosity that I was having, that I wondered what would happen if, because I had engaged with a lot of interfaith dialogue.
yeah.
And I really wondered what that kind of conversation would look like if we were talking about race and culture, as opposed to talking about religion, or in addition to talking about religion.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping, because I live in Houston, which is the most diverse city in the country, at least on paper, uh, that somebody was already doing that and that I could just sort of plug myself into it. And I couldn't find what I wanted. So on the leap day of 2020, so February 29th, 2020, I hosted an event called 100 Voices with 100 women where we had a guided conversation about race and culture. And uh, annually, it'll be sort of my gift to my city that I love. And that was as far as that thought carried me. Well, a friend in Seattle invited me to replicate that event for Seattle. And that we started planning that for like the summer of 2020. And then COVID happened and the world shut down.
Yeah.
Right. So then
Yeah.
we decided we're still going to have our event. We're just going to do it virtually. So we started making plans to host this virtual event in the summer of 2020. And then in May of 2020, George Floyd was murdered and the world cracked open. Right. So we have these simultaneous things happening. Meanwhile, the women who were in that room with us on February 29th were telling people, hey, I know we're in a season where we might need to have this conversation, and I know who can help you have this conversation. So the work started to snowball in a way that I had not anticipated. Uh, and then people who knew that I had a teaching and training background asked if I would come into organizations and do DEI, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't plan that, right? I didn't anticipate doing that, but I am an educator. I can offer a concept to people in a way that they can understand it. And so I leaned into the invitations, right? We were doing 100 Voices and I was doing air quotes DEI education. And part of that really didn't feel right in my body. Um, Mostly because I felt like people were inviting me as a way to check a thing off a list.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
And I did not want to be party to that. If we're going to talk about the things that make us human at our best and at our worst, then we have to be honest about those things. And so I started really considering and how I want to show up in the world and what I want that to look like. And so I knew that I wanted it to be more human. I knew that not to take race out of it at all, but to make sure that if we're going to talk about it, that we talk about it.
Right.
Right. Um, and not to make um, diversity, equity, and inclusion just some fly by night afterthought, right? To give us a way to think about the way we make decisions and how they impact humans. And so I developed this framework, which I originally called human centered equity, which I now call a more human approach. And human is an acronym. I love acronyms. They make things sticky. And and the human acronym stands for honest, urgent, meaningful, accountable, and nuanced. And this is a framework you can lay over the top of any scenario or decision that you're trying to make.
So it's acknowledging or moving to or incorporating that more human approach. And then I love it. You say it's an acronym. And even in the acronym, each of those words contains a value that can be really helpful towards making sure our actions are in alignment with what we're doing. Yeah. And I really appreciate that. I often talk about, I use education as a way to lessen the distance between who we say we are and how the results of what we're doing, the actions that we're taking are actually felt by the people that we say we want to show up for. And so you've got, all right, these are these this it's an acronym, but then within that, I love it. There's so many components in there, and that folks can really ask questions, can look in the mirror, can stay mindful, can stay really mindful and thoughtful and purposeful while they are doing the work, while they're engaging. And as you say, like whatever the scenario might be, to ensure they're using that approach. You mentioned during the Great Awakening of 2020, there are a lot of folks who were seeing police brutality, racism as if it was something new. Move forward 4 years, not very long in the scheme of things. And that awakening has led to equity burnout and white backlash.
So if you're familiar with pendulums, if you pull the pendulum on one side and you hit it, going to knock something on the other side. And that is um, the simplest analogy I can say for what I'm seeing. Um, we came at this thing with all this force, right? And sometimes force can cause harm. It's maybe unintentional harm, but harmful nonetheless, right? Sometimes there's a disconnect for people in the words I use and in the work that I do, right? So I say that my approach to this work is incremental and organic, right? When I say that it is incremental and organic, I mean that it happens a little bit at a time and it happens in a way that feels natural. And also in the human acronym, I use the word urgent, right? And so people are like, how can it be incremental and organic and also urgent? Well, here's the thing. If everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. And so our response to where pain is needs to be urgent. And we can use a hospital as our reference point, right? So if I go to the hospital today and I have cut on my face and it is bleeding, I may get seen quickly, but if they can assess that there's no major damage, I might have to wait, right? But if I go to the hospital and there is a hole in my head, I'm going to be seen with some degree of urgency. Yes?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and that's leading me to equity. Somebody may show up and say, "Oh, wait a minute, I've been waiting in here. How's that person getting seen before I do?" But that when you describe those injuries, very different. The stakes were very different for those things. Yeah.
The stakes are different, right? Which one of these things in this moment is life or death? Which one of these things has a deeper hole, right? And so, we're not going to get into the oppression Olympics and who's
Yeah.
had it worse, right? But if we fail to have a conversation about the harm that has occurred to the people who are descendants of enslaved humans in America, and if we fail to have a conversation about the harm that has occurred to the descendants of people who were here before this land was colonized, called them Native American, called them indigenous, the people who were here before, who were annihilated and or forced to assimilate.
Mhm.
Without having an honest conversation, again, back to honesty, right? The H in the human acronym. If we're not going to be honest about how we got here, right? And why so many people are still left behind. I tell people all the time that we cannot legislate hearts. And while legislation is important, and I am an advocate for being a voter and an active citizen and a person who understands what's happening in your community and in your state, in your country, I understand that the challenge that we are facing is in the hearts and minds of men and not in our legislation. Not only in
Not
our
only in
legislation.
our legislation. Yeah, yeah. It can definitely be a reflection of that.
So we talk about critical race theory, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is it is Kershaw's attempt at saying to America, right, that our legislation is a reflection of the hearts and minds of men. And so we need to change the legislation and be mindful about what happens in our legislation. And also, we have to change the hearts and minds of men. And I'm using men as a global catch-all for human, which I shouldn't do, right? The hearts and minds of people, the hearts and minds of humans.
Yeah.
My father has an expression, you can't grow a pine tree from a cactus seed. which basically just means whatever's in you is what's coming out.
Mhm.
And in America, we have been trying to grow pine trees with cactus seeds for a long time. We've been saying we are the greatest country in the world. Our citizens are happy here. We are one nation under God, indivisible. But that truth only applies to some citizens. And so until that language is true for all, it's not true.
It's not true. And, I like that. You said grow what'd you say about you said did you say
Pine tree,
pineapples?
a
A
pine tree.
pine tree out of yeah, yeah, you can't do it's not addressing the roots, you know? That's also one of the quotes that inform how I show up in these spaces is, Dr. King said, always say to America is be true to what you say on paper. So, yeah, like you say, we say it on paper. Yeah, this is the greatest country in the world. Our people are happy here. Not everybody is experiencing that. When he was talking and now today too, not everybody is experiencing that yet.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a James Baldwin quote that I want to try to find so I don't get it wrong.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah, we got time. And also his quote about being a Negro in this country and being, relatively conscious as being in this state of rage. Not just that what we experience as Black people, but of the ignorance and criminal indifference on the part of white people to care, to understand, or to act or to change. And so, yeah, I really appreciate how you talked about, the work is to channel that rage in a way so it doesn't consume you, it doesn't destroy you, And for me, it's been doing this kind of work, it's being in this space, social justice
Yeah.
education with others working toward equity in a way that it doesn't, totally burn me up, you know?
So the quote, the James Baldwin quote is, I love America more than any other country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. And I think that quote is sort of an anchor for how I view being a citizen of this country. Right? So often Black people in America are called African American, African hyphen American, right? So not just American, right? Americans of a particular origin. Well, I'm a sixth generation Texan, and certainly I have some African ancestry. But I am saying that in my body and in my reality, this soil is home. And I am just as much right to it than anybody else in this soil. And I should not have to be classified with a hyphen in the land of my birth and my lineage. And America has a way of doing that to all groups of people who are not Anglo British, right? Everybody else gets to be hyphenated with something as some qualifier of their Americanness. And I
Mhm.
want to know at what point do I get to just be an American without the default for the word American being white people?
All these reminders of otherness are not, not quite you said qualifiers, I think that sums it up, but like, yeah, you in the group, but you're not really in the group, or you're a subcategory, right?
It's like people who have immigrated here, right, from other places and who wish to hold on to their native identity. I absolutely applaud that, right? By all means, use the hyphen if it works for you, right? I have no such lineage,
Right, for you, yeah.
right? There is a poem in the book Born on the Water, which is the children's adaptation of the 1619 Project. And the poem is called Ours is Not an Immigration Story. I do not come from a family of immigrants. I come from a family of people who were brought here worked against their will
Against their will.
for no pay, at some point eventually were emancipated here and have survived all the things that America tried to use to take it out.
Mm-hmm.
And if that does not give me a right to be called American without a qualifier, then what does?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why what I'm getting from what you're saying, like talking about the root causes, if we can't have real honest conversations about that, then we'll continue to see some of the things that we're seeing, because even in that, our story, it's not an immigration story, but you'll hear often, oh yeah, we're a country of immigrants. That is everyone's experience. And in saying that in a matter of fact kind of way, not saying it's not true for many people, but there's also a sense of erasure of the conversation of the folks who it isn't true for. Our story is not an immigration story. It's reflecting my own experience. Even in hearing you say, about connections to lineage and stuff, there's a conversation behind that. The reason that is a reality, a very intentional design of why that is a reality. And so I appreciate that honesty in there and the more human approach and the need for, again, we really need to address the roots of these things that we're seeing. In order to really be honest, we have to have a real conversation about it.
Sometimes when we're talking about honesty, we'll say we shouldn't share our feelings when we're talking about what is real. And I disagree with that. I think that feelings are very much fact for the person that is having those feelings. And so in our curiosity about where we need to be honest, we do need to consider the feeling that is associated with what has happened. Right.
That's right.
And the person or people who have caused the harm don't get to tell the person who has been harmed when to get over it or how to
Hmm.
get over or how to respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Or to not bring feelings into it as well in the context of, you're talking about Black people, you're talking about history with surviving, slavery, segregation, all these things. And in the context of that, recognizing folks, we didn't have that opportunity always to express or sometimes could not out of fear of safety or other things. And so to say like, oh yeah, let's just leave emotions out of it. We can't do, or folks aren't gonna listen to you if you bring your emotions into it. That's another way of reinforcing white privilege, that power structure. And so by acknowledging and inviting in and welcoming, we need to the feelings are I love how you said that. Feelings are facts, the folks who experience them. And then I think it's beneficial for us to get that release and name the feelings and embrace them and understand them. And then also, y'all who are the descendants and the beneficiaries of enslavers also need to experience in order to be more human and hear these feelings and also think about what are you losing? What have you lost from all of the dehumanization that made these atrocities possible? You need to learn
yeah,
from that. You need to recognize that as well.
this trauma that we experience is a shared trauma, right? That you cannot inflict the amount of harm on people or be descendants of people who have inflicted the amount of harm on people without that trauma having a through line in your body as well. And so there's healing that needs to happen on both sides of this equation until we decide to heal from it. Then it just continues to fester and to smell,
Mhm.
right? Which we can see it lives out its toxicity because we pushed it down, right?
Yep.
We did I don't see color, I don't see difference thing. We did that thing and we pushed it down. We also shamed people for having ideas about other people that were taught to them. Again, show up as shame instead of saying, there's another way to approach this, right? I need you to be honest about who you are and about how you got to be who you are. And also, I need you to unlearn these things. Isabel Wilkerson, who is the author of the book Caste and The Warmth of Other Suns. And in the book Caste, which was one of my favorite books ever still, I read in 2020, parts of that book are still resonating with me.
Even
And
now. Yeah.
yeah, here and now. And the movie Origin, which is based on the book as well. But she makes reference, Isabel Wilkerson makes reference to America as an old house. And I live in an old house. So that analogy really spoke to me, right?
Hmm.
Um, when you inherit an old house, when you move into an old house, um, it comes with problems sometimes. And you weren't the person who built it. You didn't live there first, right? You did not create these problems, but you live here. And you can let the roof leak on your head, or you can fall through the hole in the floor, or you can fix it,
Or you can fix
right?
it.
Or you can fix it. And so I really appreciate that idea of how our country is this old house that we've all inherited and that we got to coexist in. And either we can repair the things that are damaged or we're going to live with it how it is. And it's just going to get worse if we don't fix it, right? If you've ever had a leaky roof that you did not repair or did not repair timely, the hole just gets bigger. The other person whose work I reference is Marie Kondo. Marie Kondo goes into people's homes, into their spaces, and helps them organize the stuff. She walks in and asks people, what of these things is bringing you joy? And she asks you to either hold on to the things that bring you joy or to bless them and send them on their way. But the beginning of that process is taking everything out.
Yeah.
It's a thing I invite people to do when I work with them, is to look at all your stuff.
Yeah. You have to look at all your stuff. I'm like, when you talk about the pendulum, I can remember that time too, and just hearing a lot of, yeah, we need to do better. Oh, I'm listening, I'm learning. And now it's like, wait, all those book clubs, all those things, all that learning spaces folks said they were going to engage in, a lot of that talk is gone away now. Somebody didn't do the reading. So I'm hearing you talk about how we push stuff down. I feel like it's swinging back in this way of like, no, we're just going to ignore it. But as you say, to get to that place of really truly moving forward, it's like we got to put it all out there. We have to assign some value to it. I like how you said we got to touch everything. You take it all out, touch everything. Can you share a moment or a memory where you felt really engaged and passionate about your work, where you kind of felt like, okay, so this is the reason why I do this. This is why I get up every day. What was happening? What made that moment so memorable?
So many of those. There's so many of those. Um, well, I'll tell you something that happened recently. I don't consider myself a great salesperson. I've had some sales jobs in my life, but I don't really consider myself a great salesperson, which is part of the challenge with being an entrepreneur, right? Is that like
Yeah, man.
I'm out here with this offering that people need to know about, but I'm not doing a great job at selling it, right? But I do consider myself a really decent educator. And so when people are talking to me in their regular lives and they're sharing uh, a challenge that they're facing, which happens to me often, it has happened to me my whole life. People just share their stuff with me. And that happened recently, this past weekend, actually, in a coffee shop. I was having a conversation with a woman. We were the last two people in a group of people who were there together. She was sharing a scenario. It happened to be about her business and her work, but it was also kind of personal because she was in a friendship with the person who she was also the boss of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was really struggling mostly with this piece of accountability, right? Because she had asked him to do some things, he didn't do them. And so we worked through her scenario, through this human framework, and I could see her lights coming on. It really made me excited because I was like, okay, this is practical and applicable and easy to use and easy to remember. And so that's a recent thing.
When you can connect those dots, hope folks make meaning of that. And those kind of interactions also have their way of creating this ripple effect too. Cause like I can even think back at earlier point in your story. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna organize this thing. Maybe I'll do this annually. It'll be the gift to the city that I love. And then next thing you know, the people who are in attendance are having this experience. And then they're talking to other people. Now you're getting invited to go to Seattle to do it. And things are just growing from there. And so even through the human approach that you use, I think there's also the creation of these human connections that are, again, creating these ripple effects here. And so, yeah, appreciating that storytelling there, because that even can have impacts that sometimes we might be able to predict, sometimes we might not. Oh, yeah, you remember this, or oh, yeah, yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that. There's power in that, in those interactions and that storytelling.
Sometimes people will invite me in to work with their organization, and they will ask me to offer them outcomes. I um, am holding that as a boundary that I do not offer outcomes.
Hmm.
I offer information, I offer strategy. I cannot predict outcomes because humans are human. And it's not like putting the information into AI where you can sort of predict what's going to come out on the other end.
Hmm.
We put stuff into humans and humans use it in the way humans need it. And then what comes out on the other end of that is hopefully people who are creating space for other people to feel safe, seen, and welcome. That is my hope, but I can't make that
Hmm.
as a prediction.
Yeah, I often talk about it, and I have some other friends and colleagues who talk about it too, and they describe it in terms of enabling conditions. So, like, what are some of the things we can incorporate that could go towards creating these conditions that we see? And in a way, I love how you said you hold that as a boundary and being clear, with folks about that, because I think that also can lend itself to this checklist kind of thing. Like if we did this, we did that. And then if it doesn't go completely the way we wanted, then we can say, oh, look, we did this and that. And then you say it doesn't work. But in actuality, I'm sure, I know you work with folks. I'm just thinking too, having experiences and doing that. Sometimes the outcome or the thing that happens is a move in the direction of creating more psychological safety or the kind of psychological safety that's required to start having these conversations or get at the root of addressing some of the root underlying issues that are influencing our culture as an organization or whatever the group might be needing and wanting to get at. And so, in similar ways, and you talk, what I got from what you were saying earlier around expectations, it's like, hey, this took a long time to do this now. So one interaction or one workshop or what, you can't assume that that's going to immediately transform things. But what it can do is move us closer. And okay, if we keep doing that, let's keep doing it. All right. So yeah, let's talk about psychological safety. Let's create those conditions where people can share their experience. Well, actually, it's not great for me. And here's why. And let's increase our capacity, going back to what you're talking about in difference too. Sometimes even recognizing those narratives. Somebody might say something and have a lived experience that's different from what the dominant or prevailing narrative is. And how can we be okay with recognizing, okay, all right, so you know what? This is great for me. My life is structured in this way. I have all these different things. Somebody else is coming at it from a different experience, and here's why. And oh, okay. So we're noticing and recognizing, like, okay, there are multiple experiences here. And let's see how we can then use this awareness as a place to change things in a ways where folks are having the same experience that I or similar in terms of maybe not similar in terms of lived experience, but like feeling like, okay, so this is America. This is the best country in the world. Everybody don't feel like that. We know everybody don't, and we know everybody's not feeling that. But how can we be okay with hearing, understanding the stories and the narratives and the experiences, and then incorporating that, taking it personal from a sense of not, oh, now that you all have shared these things with me, you're wrong for sharing them, but taking it personal. Okay, what does this mean about the way we structured this thing, and how can we change it to make that truer for everybody? And so I appreciate you saying like, okay, I hold this as a boundary because I can see how in the absence of that too, that can sort of lead toward this checklist kind of a thing. It's like, no, You're talking about having interactions that are more, authentic than that. I'm also seeing too, as you're storytelling, the value in the organic, the face to face. What I get from that is also sustained too. So this isn't like it's not just this one interaction. We trying to, how can we continue to do this in a way that builds towards the thing that we all want? So I appreciate you for sharing all of your experiences there. Now, I asked about a moment where you felt as if you, or something, a memory experience where you felt as if like, there's a reminder. This is why I do this every day. Now, are there any things that kind of keep you up at night? It could figuratively or literally when it comes to engaging in this work. Like it could be a burning question that you have. It could be a concern. Oh, we really need to move in this way, or this, here's what's missing, but anything that sort of keeps you up at night when it comes to doing this work.
Yeah. So I have the blessing and the curse of being sort of a walking idea factory.
Hmm.
And there are always new ideas around what's really burning presently. Like there's a little ember that won't die, is this idea of how to be a citizen. What does it look and feel like to be an active citizen? Do you know what your rights are as a citizen? And not from like this like legal perspective. I'm not asking everybody to go to law school, right? Or to become some like constitutional scholar, but you should know what being a citizen gives you access to
Hmm.
and why people try to immigrate here. You should know what the country promises to citizens so that we can hold them accountable to the promises
We can hold them accountable.
or to go take it back, right?
Takes me to that James Baldwin quote you mentioned earlier. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah. If you've ever had a bicycle stolen from you, right, and you are walking down the street and you see somebody on your bicycle, and you're like, "Hey, that looks like my bike," and then they try to convince you that it's not your bike, even though your mama engraved your
mhm.
name on it, right? The bike belongs to me.
Belongs to me.
Give me my bike, you know? So we
Yeah.
out here with rights and privileges that belong to us, that have our name written on them, that other people are trying to keep from us, and we are not knowing to go ask for them, to stand up for them, to demand them.
So this idea of what does it mean to be an engaged citizen? What does it mean? Who or what are some, it could be people, experiences, resources that you feel have contributed to the formation of how you approach this work of social justice, racial justice, equity?
I've already sort of mentioned several of them, right? So my parents, my children, I have my sister, my children. I have 3 daughters. They motivate me in multiple ways. Both of my grandmothers were active citizens and active politically.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like I'm carrying a torch that was passed to me. And then there are people present and past whose work I revere and admire: Harriet Tubman, James Baldwin,
Mhm.
Isabel Wilkerson, Bill Hooks, Audre Lorde, so many.
Okay. And then, what would you say to or about them? And it could be collective or it could be if you want to focus on you, but it could also be broadly. What would you say to or about them in terms of just speaking to the gratitude of their contributions or their influence on you?
There is an expression, and I don't know who to give credit to,
Mm.
but I am because they are.
Ubuntu. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. I am because they are. My collective gratitude is thank you for being who you've been so that I can be who I am.
Okay. So I'm thinking about the human approach again in the work that you're doing, and what I was getting a little bit from what you're saying in terms of accountability and other like things that can sustain people in engaging in the kind of work that you're engaging with others. Like, how do you sustain that over time I'm also thinking that quote, and I was just talking about this with a guest the other day, the quote that says, when you're accustomed to privilege, equity looks like oppression, which is taking me back to what you were saying earlier around like, if we can just like, how can we recognize difference, be okay with difference for what it is without responding in these harmful ways? So I'm saying all this sort of this context to ask you the question, what sorts of practices do you think are important, essential for sustaining this more human approach? And for folks who engage in this work and the gatherings that you organize and when you're working with folks, what are some things you think can go into supporting folks in sustaining these interactions or this commitment to engaging in this way beyond your time? All right, I'm here with the organization, but then y'all got to go out and continue to live your lives. What are some practices or what are some elements? And it could be within what you've laid out, but yeah, what are some things that you think are essential for sustaining this kind of work?
I will give you three things.
Okay.
Two of them are things I've been using for a long time, and one of them is sort of new for me.
Okay. Okay.
The first one is love first always, which it could stand alone by itself, but love is also an acronym. Love stands for
Let's
listen with
go.
your listen with your heart, own your experience, venture into unfamiliar territory, and expect the best. So starting there, right, in all of our interactions with each other, remembering put love first by again listening with our heart, owning our experience, venturing into unfamiliar territory, and expecting the best. So that's the first one. The second one is I don't have a catchy phrase for it yet. 2 C's and a D. So it capacity, capability, and desire. So we can't expect people to be successful in whatever the thing we're asking them to do if those three things are not present.
Yeah.
So we have to feel capable, right? They also have to have the capacity, right? Is there space to take this in? And they have to have a desire. And you can have two of the three, and you're not going to get very far. You can have any combination of the two, of the three, but you aren't going to get very far. You have to have all three
Three.
to also think about this. And do you have a desire? And that one is sometimes the hardest one for us, right? Yeah, I could. And yeah, I know, like I could make space, but I don't really want to. That
Hmm.
desire, that trips us up sometimes, right? And the third thing, love first always. That's number one. 2 C's and a D. That's number two. And the third thing is blow bubbles.
Blow
Literally
bubbles. All right.
blow bubbles.
I
So I
love how
use
you had them within arm's reach too.
always. So I use bubbles as a way of staying mindful
Mm.
to remind myself to breathe and to literally watch things leave my body that don't belong there. And it's a technique I offer to people whenever we're going to work together, especially if we're going to work together in person. Um, because sometimes when we're having conversations that we believe are going to be hard, we hold our breath. And breath sustains our life. So you cannot be walking around here holding your breath and thinking that you're going to make it through the end of this conversation.
That's
So if you need a reminder to breathe, blow bubbles.
So you said three things, but even within them, there's all these, it's so much intention behind this. Thank you so much. What would you want listeners, what do you hope they take away from your story today? And then what actions would you encourage them to take?
This work is real work. And in order to sustain the work, in order to get through the work, in order to learn more so that we can do more, we have to give ourselves and other people grace. So that would be my one takeaway.
Okay.
And my action would be do something, to borrow from Michelle Obama, right? Don't just look at the world burning around you, not pick up a bucket or a tablespoon and put some water on it. Do something.
Do some. Do some. All right. All right. So I have 3 finish the statement prompts, and then we're literally going to be in the last question. But 3
Okay.
finish the statement prompts. And it's not a game, no, but it's just a different way. I can ask you these questions today. It's really about a snapshot of where your thinking is in this moment. Ask you the same questions 6 months from now, 2 years. It might be different, might be similar, might be different. But
Let's finish this question.
okay, cool, cool, cool. And you can say as little or as much as you want to say with any of these. So
Okay.
finish the statement. True social justice is possible when?
True social justice is possible when we all work together and understand that our story is not the only story.
My approach to social justice is shaped by.
My approach to social justice is shaped by love and humanity.
Understanding and sharing our social justice origin stories is important because
We don't live in this world alone, and everybody's story contributes to the larger story. And without knowing the stories of our neighbors, we don't know how our story is impacting them positively or negatively.
Mhm. My sincere hope is that this storytelling, your storytelling, the many storytellers who contributed to this project, that they'll be around for a long, long time. I'm hoping that our stories will outlast us in many ways. In consideration of that, for future generations who may come across these recordings, this recording in particular, is there any wisdom you'd like to pass on to them? What would you want them to know for future generations who would come across this recording? What would you want to share with them? What would you want them to know?
Oh, future generations, I would want them to know that there is more to the story no matter who told it to you. And you should stay curious about what else is missing from the story.
Yeah, all right. And I will also say, and I started with this a little bit, but again, just a reminder that this is an organizational histories section of social justice origin stories. And so, Tracie and I met. I was putting some thoughts out and some things out into the world. We were connected. And in your story too, Tracie, you were sharing how, I'm just going to do this thing, you know, maybe I'll do it annually if it works out. And it has grown, and so it's just a reminder to folks out there. If you have an idea that's been on the shelf, if you have some way you want to be a part of bringing about more equity into the world, is to act on that idea. I know, Tracie, you said do something earlier on, do something. So be encouraged in doing that and taking the steps necessary. Those impacts and those effects can go beyond what we might have even originally imagined. To the listeners, yeah, get out there and do something. Take that idea off the shelf if you have it, because we need it. We need you. So thank you. All right. Tracie Jae, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story with me, with our listeners. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and subscribe to Social Justice Origin Stories wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch video episodes on YouTube at Social Justice Origin Stories, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Video episodes are also available on the project website, socialjusticeoriginstories.com. I'd love to hear about how you're engaging with the stories. Share your thoughts at socialjusticeoriginstories.com/contact or by emailing stories@socialjusticeoriginstories.com. To support the work of Social Justice Origin Stories, consider becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep this research going and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/socialjusticeoriginstories to learn more and to make a contribution. Again, that's patreon.com/social justice origin stories. You can start or stop anytime. Social Justice Origin Stories is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Rolando Thompkins-Jones. Many thanks to our storyteller this week and the many storytellers who have contributed to this project. And thank you for joining me this week. Take care.